two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is
from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The episode, the Monday Morning Quarterback, on the 27th of January, 2020. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. This is an extended version of the episode. What that means is we are airing it later on a Monday, and many people will get it early Tuesday morning, which would be the 28th. But nonetheless, the information is timely. On Monday, day 2 of the defense presentation involving the impeachment of DJ Trump. And his lawyers were there, including the constitutional scholar, Professor Dershowitz was there. And they had political tort flamethrower Ken Starr also appeared in it, and he was involved, Ken Starr that is, in the impeachment of William Jefferson Clinton, and the trial before the Senate, and President Clinton was impeached, period. But he was impeached in the House, let me get that right. In the Senate, he was acquitted of the charges. Now, the primary difference in his particular impeachment was a personal matter around Monica Lewinsky and whether or not he gave the facts of the case or not in a factual manner. Now, in this particular episode, it involves conduct in the White House and the attempt to manipulate the Ukrainian government into investigation of Joe Lunchbox Biden and his son, as he called him, surviving son, we want to be respectful of that, Dodgy Biden. And they brought that out on Monday also. Now, the question here is how this all plays out. What we looked at the polling, and we'll get to it in a few minutes here, that some of the polls, including Emerson, have DJ Trump up by about 2 to 3 points in his approval rating. President Clinton, after his acquittal, was in the 60s, and he left office at 70%, very, very high. Now, in a polarized setup as we have today, that is pretty much constant around the number of people that actually voted for DJ Trump. How it will affect the nation in the long term, and when we say long term, we're meaning in the fall of this year, 2020, that is up in the air. What has come out is a book, a manuscript by the flamethrower John Bolton. John Bolton has been a virtuosi. He's written for all kinds of publications, you name it. He's been there, from commentary to In These Times, and various others. He has been a hawk, a classic neocom operator, basically speaking, a foe of the Russian Federation, a foe of the UN, and he was there. And how he fits in the Trump administration, very interesting situation. As far as Iran, was a hawk on that. But at the same time, a self-promoter. So therefore, how many self-promoters can you have in an administration? The cheap self-promoter, DJ Trump, and various others that appeared on the scene there have not lasted very long. But Bolton was there. Bolton had been in the foreign policy business for a very, very long time. And DJ Trump was, as they say, new to the neighborhood. That's one of the things there. But back to the team, one of the presenters today, I forget who she was right now, but had the audacity to compare Rudy Giuliani to the progressive Chicago attorney Clarence Darrow. Clarence Darrow, it's utterly to compare the two. It's folly at its best. Rudy Giuliani, in his best moments, is no Clarence Darrow. First of all, Clarence Darrow was a premier defense attorney, and Giuliani had been a prosecutor and a persecutor in New York, stop and frisk, the precursor to, until he was defeated by David Dinkins, an African American. Anyway, nonetheless, he became, before Bloomberg, who was running around now to African American communities, claiming he made a mistake with stop and frisk. Kind of a little bit of historic tour of Gracie, a mansion there in New York. But to Clarence Darrow defended people that were outcasts. He defended anarchists. He defended the Low brothers. He's one of the principal reasons that I got into criminal law was Clarence Darrow, no doubt about that. Came out of Indiana and made his habitat in Chicago, and it went out into places like Idaho, etc., defended the anarchists out there in Coeur d'Alene and various other places that he went to defend people. And the Scopes trial in Tennessee. I mean, there's a long list where he took on William Jennings Bryan, but again, there is no comparison in the two. Giuliani being a political hack around New York, being in running as the mayor, writer Senate candidate there, being elected a mayor. He had been a U.S. attorney. That's how he used it. Tough on crime operation is what he ran. The direct opposite. But why would they bring up that name? Well, Clarence Darrow, they try to portray as a man that was continually challenging the system, etc., erratic, and then they compare that to Giuliani. But Clarence Darrow was not a lobbyist. He was not in the business of making millions of dollars. He was not a lobbyist. And this whole Ukrainian thing, not only did Giuliani represent his client, DJ Trump, he represented his own personal interests and the interests of other people in the Ukraine that were in the oil business, and then he has the audacity to talk about dodgy Biden. It's a dodgy affair, there's no doubt about that, and since the manuscript, someone leaked it, and they're saying, well, it was Bolton's lawyer was sent to the White House in late December, and the White House is saying, well, only the national security people looked at it, and it made its way to the New York Times. And nonetheless, so now it is out in the open, and some of the Republicans are saying, well, we need to call Mr. Bolton to come to the witness chair in the Senate. Amongst those is Colin, who is in trouble on re-election, and Willard Romney, who was just elected out in Utah. He's former presidential candidate there, former governor of the Commonwealth. And whomever else comes forward. Angus King, who is an independent that caucuses with the Democrats, is saying that it could be between 5 and 10 Republicans that would get on board with Bolton as a witness. Now, there's also rumors that perhaps there's been some negotiation between Schumer and old man McConnell to get a witness list together to bring Bolton in, and perhaps even throw dodgy Biden onto the bus. Now, he would not come and testify there. no doubt, and that would be a major disruption. So that's one of the things wrestling around here now on the national scene. And the Trump administration also will switch a little bit, since this is Holocaust remembrance, 75 years. And we look at it the way that it's being framed, at least in the U.S. and in Britain, in the U.K. The number of people killed there, they say mostly Jewish people. Well, there were Romans killed, there were Christians killed, there were communists killed in Germany as part of Adolf Hitler's crime spree. There's no doubt about that. So that the history there needs to be reflected in a factual manner and not in a revisionist manner. At least now they say mostly. They used to say exclusively. And in media studies, it's called framing. It's how it's presented to the American people. Brings us to 2020 on Tuesday, I think, or Wednesday. The Trump administration will present a peace plan, they call it, which the Palestinians are not a part of this peace plan, period. They reject it as ludicrous, nothing more than flummery. So therefore it's going nowhere there. But the problem is that this particular peace plan is presented by a right-wing regime. You have people like Bolsonaro involved in it, and the Likud, very right-wing parties in the Zionist state involved. And the whole ploy there is to try to get the Zionist vote in the 2020 election. Now, we look to the foreign policy of Bernie Sanders. Is the only candidate out there that has a more even-handed policy towards the Palestinians. The other candidates, you name who they are all still following Wilsonian foreign policy, which is a racist foreign policy, and they will continue to follow it. There's no doubt about that. So what comes out of this is just another right-wing solution that will last as long as the right wing has influence over the American foreign policy, primarily the American foreign policy. The British, of course, were in the colonial operation there, and they were displaced by the Zionists in this occupation of what is Palestine. But with 75 years, not very much in terms of history. The U.S. had 300 years of active slavery, and then Jim Crow, an official apartheid era in the U.S., and now we have voter suppression. So in other words, it continues here. It is not a history that is forgotten, period. So people have argued which is the greatest crime. Well, no doubt, if you talk about several years of Hitler's crime spree and genocide, and then you talk about 300 years of slavery, there's no comparison, period. So that'll be the future generations to decide of that particular situation. We'll move on quickly here to Kobe Bryant, who is being remembered by many, many, many people. And the copter crash out there, they were flying in less than favorable conditions. Fog was there, and they were trying to get visual flight rules. And for people that have been in helicopters or flew airplanes or whatever, it is not a good idea to fly a chopper when you can't see. And one of the theories now is that pilots sometimes get disoriented, and you don't know if you're going up or coming down, and the pilot got too low, hit the hillside, and that was the end of that. And there's also some disparaging spin on Kobe Bryant going back to 2003, when there was a case out in Denver. Evidently, Kobe Bryant, was staying at some hotel or whatever, and there was a worker there that accused Kobe of assaulting her. There were never any criminal charges, but there was a civil trial, and it was settled. In a civil trial, unlike a criminal trial, the preponderance of the evidence, in other words, Kobe Bryant was staying there at the time. She evidently came into his room, etc., And that was pretty much the case. But as they point out, what happened in the case was he was still playing basketball. So he would have to commute to LAX, and then he would fly by helicopter from LAX to the Staples Center. And that's how he got in the copter business. So that is brought out. And as a side note to that, the media talk about him as a successor to the apolitical Michael Jordan, and there'll be more written about this as we move along. In fact, he was on his way to a Kobe youth basketball camp or whatever it was, and those are the kinds of things that they want athletes to do, is these camps and various other PR things as role models, not to Colin Kaepernick out there, or Bill Russell. So that kind of cements that particular situation. And at the end of this broadcast, we'll have 5 or so minutes of ABC's This Week with Mr. Stephanopoulos, and he'll be spotlighting Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail, and then talk to Amy Klobuchar, who is talking about her name recognition is not as great as the others. A little bit of the brief history here of what went on in the Times. The Times endorsed both Amy Klobuchar and also, was it the Times of Milwaukee? Anyway, or the Des Moines, I think it was the Times, endorsed both as presidential candidates. There have been some endorsements going, and in Iowa, it was Elizabeth Warren, who is, depending on which poll you look at, is third or fourth at the present time. There'll be another Iowa poll by Ann Salzer, be out, I believe, on Sunday, just before the Iowa caucuses, which is on the 3rd of February. But the big story of the week was Amy Klobuchar captained the endorsement of the Manchester leader in New Hampshire. That used to be run by the rapid conservative Loeb. Is no longer around, but nonetheless, it used to be a very important endorsement in New Hampshire, and it still is today in a sense, particularly if you're not very well known. They are the largest newspaper in New Hampshire, and of course the amplification of it out there, and we'll go over that endorsement as one. I think we've pretty much went into most. We're looking at the LA Times. Incidentally, on the virus, coronavirus in China, the number of dead is 106 and going up, and over 4,500 people have been infected. So looking at that, and it continues on as President Xi Jinping said, it's a very serious situation. They've quarantined Hanong there, and that will continue. There's no doubt about that. Quarantine whole cities. Borders have been closed off, including in Hong Kong. Now, on the numbers man operation, we'll hopefully have some more on a model that is one of the models they're using at a hospital in Hong Kong, and looking at it in terms of what happened in the SARS and MERS virus, for those remembering, in the early 2000s. One of the professors there that was involved in that particular one is running the model. But now to remember, China's economy has doubled since that time, and we'll look at that on Numbers Man. That's our macroeconomics program, and some are already speculating that this particular coronavirus could end up costing China as much as 1 percentage point in GDP, since China has moved to a consumer-based economy. And of course, the charter businesses, airliners, etc., during the Lunar New Year, when people have basically not done any traveling, So the few people that have benefited, the mask makers that make the respiratory masks, and the delivery services there. So they, in fact, many of the plants are idle during this week, and they'll be extended in at least to another week. They'll be on shutdown or holiday or whatever you want to call it. So that is the latest we have on the coronavirus. And let's go, have a number of things here we need to look at. We've not looked at here, and we'll get Uncle Carl Rove in here. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal on the 23rd. Do this particular one, and we'll do it now. Will the Democrats impeach Obama? Hypocrisy is common in Washington, but impeachment is bringing out more than its fair share. That is a factual statement, and that's true of some Republicans, and the mainstream media devotes countless hours to it. What gets much less attention is the hypocrisy of the party to which most journalists are sympathetic, the Democrats he claims. But corporate media has been covering it all. Take the Senate Minority Leader Schumer. On Tuesday, he demanded the Senate call witnesses, claiming they are required for a fair trial. Well, if you have a full and fair trial, you need to get at the best evidence, slamming Republican opposition as a cover-up. Well, the Republicans are claiming the Democrats are doing a cover-up. But the GOP position is exactly what Schumer's was during Bill Clinton's impeachment. That was in 1999. A different time there, a much less polarized nation. Back then, he said it doesn't make sense for the Senate to call witnesses. They did, in fact, call witnesses. And most important and more important than hypocrisy about the process of impeachment is hypocrisy about the substance. Removing a president is the most draconian act a Congress could take, and that's what the Republicans have been arguing. It ill serves America if the party opposed to the president uses impeachment as a political weapon to tarnish his standing and weaken him for the next election. Well, it's coming. When considering the Democrats' high-minded arguments, ask yourself, what if Hillary Clinton won in 2016? After she took office, would it have been revered that her campaign hired the opposition research firm Fusion, GPS, that involves the MI5, Christopher Steele, a former intelligence officer, doesn't say, to reach out to German counterparts to elicit dirt on DJ Trump, recalling that since a discredited dossier that was peddled to the media in the fall of 2020, it was made up on unsubstantiated rumors from former Russian agencies. Well, that's been a big debate there. It's naive to believe that the Kremlin was unaware that Steele asked Moscow's pals for dirt on Trump. Well, Trump has palled up with them since then. Those spies are retired, but they rely on V.I. Putin for their pension checks and various other things, too. And amongst congressional Democrats would now be calling for Clinton's removal if she were in the Oval Office. I doubt it. I search in vain for Democratic criticism for her soliciting foreign involvement in the 2016 election. The principal charge of their impeachment case against Trump. Well, a little bit different there. DJ Trump was asking a whole nation to become involved. Moreover, while the Democrats say Trump should be removed for seeking a quid pro quo, Ukrainian investigation of Joe and Dorji Biden in return for American military aid. What about Barack Obama? This is in March of 2012. Open mic comment at the summit in Seoul. He asked the Russian Dmitry Medvedev to tell his boss, the Prime Minister Putin, that on all issues, but particularly missile defense, this can be solved, but it's important for him to give me space. Well, that's not unusual right there. This is my last election. After my election, I have more flexibility. Well, that's been common in American politics forever. In other words, Putin didn't create a problem during the re-election campaign of President Obama. Obama would show flexibility on missile defense and other important issues of national security and foreign policy after the election. Again, cracks when it comes to Democratic criticism. Then there was a House Democratic second charge that Trump refused to make his advisors and aides available for testimony as obstruction of Congress. What Democrats stream, no one is above the law. Well, that's a common one right there. When President Obama rejected Republican lawmakers' demand for a fast and furious scandal that his aides appear before Congress. Now, appearing before Congress is totally different than an impeachment inquiry. No congressional Democrat said a peak when the Justice Department held in July of 2014 that the president's immediate advisor absolutely immune from congressional testimony process, adding that this immunity is rooted in the Constitution, separation of powers. Democrats are now hyping a Government Accountability Office report, and that is factual, finding that Trump's management office and budget broke the law by delaying the Ukrainian aid. But that was $125 million was released 18 days before the end of the fiscal year. Incidentally, is the end of September. Democrats ignored the office when it found the Obama administration violated the law 7 times, most prominently in trading detainees from Guantanamo for Bergdahl here. Anyway, Bo Bergdahl, as well as twice spending government funds to lobby and preventing a regional housing and urban development director, far from an immediate presidential advisor's email account, from testifying to Congress. Again, why did no Democratic leader criticize President Obama, let alone demanded his removal? Well, first of all, President Obama was not in an impeachment process. That is a totally different situation. That was settled in the courts. Now, it has been argued that these people have argued, I should say, Congress should have went to the appeals court, and it should have been solved in the appeals court. Now, once again, that is a situation that can be brought out. It has been brought out many times, period. And it will no doubt continue to be a matter of debate if, in fact, where presidential power is a matter for the courts. But back to the idea of the courts themselves on this litigation, they would have needed to, the Democrats, go to the appeals court a number of times. Let me just get to a little bit of polling here. We have on Monday, this was USA Today, Suffolk poll, the Iowa caucuses has Joe Lunchbox Biden up by 6, Bernie Sanders at 19, Biden at 25, Little Petey at 18, Liz Warren at 13, Amy Klobuchar is at 6, Yang is at 3, and so forth and so on. Now, on Sunday, we had the CBS YouGov poll. Bernie Sanders by 1 is in Iowa. He's at 26. Joe Lunchbox Biden's at 25, and they all bunched up together. Little Petey at 22, and Liz Warren, the endorsee, there at 15. And Amy Klobuchar was at 7 in this poll, rising up there. In New Hampshire, this is NBC. Marcia's poll here. Bernie's up by 5 in this poll. He's at 22. Biden is at 15. And Little Petey's at 17. Liz Warren is at 13. Amy Klobuchar is in double digits. She will do better in New Hampshire now that she's been endorsed by the union leader. And there's a CNN University of New Hampshire poll here also has Bernie way ahead, almost in double digits by 9. Joe Lunchbox Biden is 16, and Little Petey's at 15. Again, Warren is running in the back. And what this means, well, it's fluid. But if it were to stand, she'd be in some trouble. And the Washington Post poll is the only one. Now, this is a national poll. Has Biden ahead by 12. And then comes Bernie and Warren at 14. And Buttigieg is in the single digits at 4. Amy is at 4 also. And Yang is at 6. He's been doing a little better out there. And here's a Fox News poll of all. I hadn't looked at this one. They have Joe Lunchbox Biden up by 3, 26-23 for Bernie. And this is a national poll. Again, Liz Warren is at 14. Bloomberg is at 10. Little Petey is at 7. And so forth and so on. Now, when they match these people up between Joe Lunchbox Biden and DJ Trump, Biden is up by 9. Bernie in the same matches up by 6. Warren's up by 5. Little P's up by 4. And Bloomberg is up by 8. And Amy's up by 1. A lot of that is less. This is Fox News. In New Hampshire, Biden is up by 8, 51-43 over DJ Trump. And this is NBC. Bernie's up by 8 also. And Liz Warren is up by 4. Little Petey's up by 10 according to this poll. And these were polls that were out on Sunday. And if we look back, I guess we'll look back. New York Times poll, Iowa, Bernie's up by 7, 25. Biden is 17. Little Petey is at 18. Liz Warren again is in the back there at 15. And we gave this before in Missouri. Biden is up by 25. Can't say much about that one. And that it was the latest Real Clear Politics is where we got that from. Now let's fly along here a little bit and see where we're going. We'll get to New Hampshire. And, oops. So the Des Moines Register here wins the prize. We talked about that. This Des Moines. Liz Warren got that particular one. That was on the 25th, won the coveted endorsement of Iowa's top newspaper, the Des Moines Register in Des Moines, Iowa. Editorial interviewed 9 of the candidates out of the outstanding caliber. They always say this, so they said that. Karl Rove said that about the Republicans in 2016. Turned out to be a disaster. It ultimately declared Warren as the best leader for these times. The endorsement came 9 days before the primary. There, the register is important. Media endorsed in the states affects even more pronounced this year because the poll indicates the race is up for grabs. Though Bernie and Joe Biden each lead in recent polls, and Warren and Little Petey are tied up together. The Mass Senator is not the Massachusetts Senator is not a radical as some perceived. They say the board cast her as a capitalist. That doesn't help her with progressives, with rules and accountability, so they say. And we went over this one before. 2 of the top 4 candidates, plus they say Amy Klobuchar, they're stuck in Washington. No doubt they are stuck in Washington. And Little Petey and Joe Lunchbox Biden are running amok. Period. The latest published Saturday by the Times. We've already went over that. Bernie leads the pack with 25%. The endorsement comes just one day after a campaign appealed for lower expectations in the states. And no doubt being in 5th place doesn't help one out that much. All right, let us move along here. We'll go now to the union leader in Manchester, New Hampshire. Union leader primary endorsement, Amy Klobuchar can win. If you are a New Hampshire voter who thinks Donald Trump is doing a good job, you probably slept in our in on our primary day of the 11th of February. Try as they might, this Republican challenger has not made a dent in the president's popularity within the party here. If you're an independent or Democrat, however, you may be one of those most consequential votes ever cast in the New Hampshire primary. If there's to be any realistic challenger to Trump in November, the Democratic nominee needs to have a proven and substantial record of accomplishment across party lines and ability to unite rather than divide, and the strength and stamina to go toe-and-toe with the tweeter-in-chief. That would be U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. She is sharp and witty with a commanding understanding of both history and the inner workings of Capitol Hill. Trump doesn't want to face her. He's hoping for Bernie, Biden, or little Petey or Warren. Each has weaknesses, whether age, inexperience, or a far-left agenda that thrills some liberals, but is ripe for exploitation in the mainstream general election. Senator Klobuchar has none of those weaknesses, and the incumbent needs to be presented as a challenger who is not easily dismissed. Her work in Washington has led to the passage of an impressive number of substantive bills, even as the partisan divide has deepened. In 2018, she won re-election, taking back dozens of conservative leading counties that had gone for Trump 2 years earlier, when Hillary Clinton barely beat Trump in Minnesota. In fact, Senator Klobuchar is a former prosecutor and has never lost an election. Can a woman be elected president? We say, of course, the right woman can and should be. By choosing Amy Klobuchar, New Hampshire primary voters could go a long ways to proving that, as Joe Quaddy, I suppose, editor-in-chief of the newspaper there, and Brandon, same name, McQuaddy is MCQUAID. He's the publisher, so that is from New Hampshire, and a very important endorsement in the state of New Hampshire. And let me just go over here and see if we can pull up this from the no, it's bold enough, forget that. This is from the New York Times. Trump's tied the Ukrainian aid to inquiry. He sought in the Bolton book a picture of old John Bolton standing there with various other people. This is on the 26th. Maggie Haberman here, and Michael Smith. Anyway, President Trump told his national security advisor in August that he wanted to continue freezing of $391 million in security assistance to Ukraine until officers that would help in the investigation of Democrats, including Biden. According to unpublished manuscripts by former advisor John Bolton. The president's statement, as described by Bolton, could undercut a key element of his impeachment defense, that holding up the aid was separate from Trump's request that they announced an investigation into Vice President Biden and Dodgy Biden. Bolton's explosive account of the matter at the center of the impeachment trial, and the third in American history, was included in drafts of the manuscript he circulated in recent weeks. Oh, I see. To close associates. Now, this is the first time, this is from the Times. Maggie's usually on the case, also sent drafts to the White House for review. Multiple people describe Bolton's account of the Ukraine affair. The book presents an outline of what Mr. Bolton might testify if he's called as a witness. It doesn't say he will. Over a dozen pages, Bolton describes how the Ukrainian affair unfolded over several months until he departed the White House in September. He described not only the president's private disparagements of Ukraine, but also new details about senior cabinet officers who have publicly tried to sidestep involvement. For example, Mike Pompeo, who called Mary Louise Kelly a liar, acknowledged privately there was no basis to the claim by President's attorney, Rudy Giuliani here, that the ambassador to Ukraine was corrupt, and believed that Giuliani may have been acting on behalf of other clients. I mean, we talked about that in our general introduction. Bolton also said that after the president's call, that was in July, at the president of Ukraine, he raised a question with the Attorney General Barr about concerns about Giuliani, who was pursuing a shadow Ukrainian policy without being a shadow politician. A spokesman for Barr denied it, naturally he would, and the acting White House Chief of Staff, this is Mulvaney, was present excuse me, for at least one of the phone calls. During a previously reported 23rd of February meeting where top advisors and Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, briefed him about that trip to Kiev for the inauguration of Vladimir Zelensky. The White House did not provide responses to the questions and Bolton's assertions, and Representative for Johnson Pompeo did not respond either. Okay, he provided a copy of the book to the White House. That was on the 30th. That's 12 days after Trump was impeached, to review for that's classified information. They do this all the time. The submission to the White House may have given Trump's aides and lawyers direct insight into what Bolton would say if he were to testify. The White House ordered Bolton and other key officials with first-hand knowledge of dealings not to cooperate. In recent days, some White House officials describe Bolton as a disgruntled, that's usually what former worker they're trying to sell books. The problem with John, he is a security problem. That's what Trump's people evidently told him to say. Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, said Bolton's transcript underlines the need for him to testify. Republicans were more silent. A spokesman for old man McConnell, he had nothing to say. And Bolton, 71, is a fixture in conservative national security circles. Since his days, he was in the Reagan administration, and he joined the White House in 2018. After several people recommended him to the president, including the Sheldon Adelson casino type. Key to Bolton's account is an exchange during a meeting in August with the president after he returned from vacation in Bedminster, Jersey. Bolton raised the spectrum there. He, Pompeo, and the Defense Secretary Esper have collectively pressed the president about releasing the aid a dozen times. Bolton wrote that Trump has effectively rebuffed them. Giuliani spent months stroking the president's paranoia about the Russian ambassador, the American ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. And she also testified there. And according to Bolton, in a private acknowledgement to him last spring, that Giuliani's claims about Yovanovitch had no basis, that Giuliani may have wanted to remove her because she might have been targeting his clients. In other words, a personal situation there. Yovanovitch is a Canadian immigrant whose parents fled the Soviet Union, and the Nazis, well regarded. She's a career diplomat, in other words, there won't been much time there. After the impeachment trial, Trump himself had hoped to have his defense call a range of people to testify, including Dorothy Biden, to frame the case around the Democrats, but McConnell repeatedly told the president that the witnesses could backfire. McConnell is a slick old bird. 2 or 4 Republican senators publicly open to witnesses, and again, Angus said that perhaps it would fly there. So we'll see as we continue to do this. Let me just throw in one other story. This is from the Post. Karen Tumulty here on Iowa. Iowa's looking less and less like that, clarifying a moment that the Democrats have hope for. They're bunched up together there. Well, last time around, that's on the 3rd, and has a history of picking Democratic winners in 7 of the 10 contest race since 1972. The first place finish in Iowa has gone on to become the party's nominee, I should say. I can recall we were walking those Iowa cornfields with Dr. George McGovern back, and he became the nominee of the party. These two scenarios, which could definitely shape the one of them is the former Vice President Biden pulls off a convincing victory, and Iowa win, coupled with Biden's durable lead, could position him as an unstoppable going forward. Another would be a big win for Bernie Sanders, who is joining a surge in the polls. The contest would then become a scramble within the party to find an established figure who could stop Bernie. One possible beneficiary would be Bloomberg, who is spending millions of dollars there, and he won't kick in until the Super Tuesday. Iowa doesn't seem like the ideal place for Democrats to start their shopping for a nominee. The state's registered Democrats, Iowa across section of the U.S., now a representative increase. They need a diverse party that needs more younger voters to win. According to the National Voter File, I was on the train, and I heard some people talk about 80% of Iowa Democrats are Europeans. Their median age is 55. Some party officials are predicting the turnout will break records. Well, who does that help? That's kind of interesting. If it breaks records, high turnout probably would not help Biden as much as it would help Bernie, and perhaps help Amy Klobuchar. I'd think so. And if Amy can crawl out of her 4th or 5th place and come up, it'd be very interesting. How it works at 7 p.m. Central Time. That'll be on next Monday. Democrats will gather in 1,678 sites, caucus sites. They'll be in from libraries to churches, and for the first time, the party will also set up 90-plus satellite locations to accommodate people who work night hours or who have disabilities to prevent them going to the regular ones. They were going to do virtual ones. That got thrown out. Any contender who fails to get at least 15, let me get the rules in here, of those in attendance is deemed non-viable. His or her backers will get a chance to join supporters of their second choice. Now, this is after the speech making and so forth and so on. Now, this is a result of 2016 when it was stolen from Bernie. Hillary Monster Clinton came out with 49.8% of the delegate equivalents, and Bernie got 49.6%. You can see that's 2 tenths there, and that's some people said Bernie won that. The move, which comes in response to complaints of unfairness there, is designed, let me just get this move here that they've done. This time around, for the first time, Iowa Democratic Party will announce how many actual votes each candidate receives in the 2 rounds of caucusing. So we won't have the delegate equivalents, we'll say how many votes they got. The open potential for a split electoral and popular vote of any kind. One candidate might come out ahead in the delegate count, which is traditionally defined as winning of Iowa. Another would come up with a higher tally of votes across the state. No doubt there. Our candidate who has the most votes in the first round might fall behind in subsequent rounds, so forth and so on. Anyway, turnout, if the turnout to be all Iowa has to offer Democrats this year, the loser may end up being the Hawkeye State itself. Well, many people have talked about the Hawkeye State and how the Hawkeye State could ultimately end up. Anyway, this will end us. We go on to Mr. Stephanopoulos in about a 5-minute situation which Bernie is in. And then Amy Klobuchar talks about her name recognition. It has definitely went up. There are two important things in her situation, three actually, but the most important one in Iowa was the Quad City newspaper's endorsement of Amy Klobuchar, and now we have in New Hampshire the union leader's endorsement there, and also the New York Times. So in other words, that brings more money into her with Liz Warren. I'm not sure how Liz Warren will be able to utilize that, but when you bring more and more name recognition in there, that means more money Amy gets, and Amy can go on not only to New Hampshire but to the Super Tuesday, where she would really need the money. One political scientist, a veteran in Minnesota I was reading, said of all things he'd expect Amy Klobuchar to still be up and running well. No doubt about that. She had advice from people like Walter Mondale, and Walter Mondale knows where the money is, and various other people in her home state of Minnesota. And again, that is an alternative to Bernie and Liz Warren. It's becoming less an alternative to Liz Warren. Liz Warren has got to get up out of her where she is. I mean, they could all be bunched up together. They've thrown in everything they can. They've got the corporate people. They've got Bloomberg with his millions of dollars. They've got Tom Steyer with his millions of dollars in that race. They even brought in Donald Patrick from the Commonwealth. He didn't went anywhere. And they've had various alternative characters there to criticize, particularly Bernie. And then on this, issue of gender, they've criticized Bernie on that. That hasn't stuck to Bernie. Bernie is, as they say, is burning on. And that is what they worry about. When we look at the polling, even the people in Iowa had to admit Bernie represents the working class. Well, that's the same class of people that spearheaded DJ Trump and President Obama into the White House. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Good day, and we will return. And we're working on our numbers man, this macroeconomics thing. We'll have Greta Thunberg there, where she was speaking at the World Economic Forum, which ended in Davos, Switzerland, and some others in that little piece there. And we'll talk about SARS. Hopefully we'll have SARS. The carnival virus here, the new one. Anyway, we'll talk about that and where a model that we can bring that forth, and the economic impact. Incidentally, the market in the U.S. is down 4 and something points, and in Asia they were all down. And the last report I got in Asia, they had stabilized. So we'll talk about how the markets respond to something and how they tend to also at the same time start normalizing any situation that we can think of. Incidentally, I think we reported on the protests in Mississippi around the Parchman Penitentiary there, and we also have something from the Medium. We'll have to get the next report on the Amazon workers, and that these are workers that work on environmental justice. Basically been told by Amazon to shut their mouths, and they're not doing that. A lot of controversy around that. We'll get that in a future report. Good day.
I've known some of them for years. They're good people. But if you look at the structure of our campaign, our ability to mobilize millions of people all over this country, our ability to raise funds from the grassroots, not from the wealthy and the powerful, our ability to put together an agenda that reaches out and speaks to the working class of this country in a unique way, I think you'll conclude that our campaign is the strongest campaign to defeat Trump.
Senator Bernie Sanders making his pitch in Iowa yesterday. He's leading the Iowa polls right now. We're going to be joined now by one of the candidates trying to unseat him, Amy Klobuchar, senator from Minnesota. Senator Klobuchar, thank you for joining us this morning. That pitch has been the heart of your campaign as well, that you're a Democrat who can win in red areas. How do you respond to Senator Sanders?
I think when you look at what just happened in the last election, as well as those governor races in Kentucky and Louisiana, look what happened. Those were candidates where Democrats won in states that were red, states that were purple, like Michigan, like Kansas, congressional races all over the country that fit the districts, that fit the states, that did not suggest blowing up our current health system and kicking 149 million Americans off their current health insurance in 4 years. Sanders and I have a big disagreement on that issue. And I also think that you've got people out there that are interested in having a candidate that has a history, like I do, that brings the receipts to this race of actually winning in very red and very purple suburban districts, and doing that by bringing along with her a fired-up Democratic base, as well as independents and moderate Republicans. What most matters to our Democrats, I was just speaking in the Quad Cities last night, what most matters is winning and uniting our party and someone that can do that. I think that's where the country is, George.
You won a big endorsement yesterday from the Manchester Union leader in New Hampshire. They praise your record of accomplishment, ability to unite the country, and say you have the best chance to win as well. But Senator Warren got the endorsement of the Des Moines Register, and you've never cracked into the top 4 in Iowa polling. So can you even get to New Hampshire if with a 5th place finish in Iowa?
Oh, I'm going to New Hampshire, George. I am actually got the New York Times endorsement along with Elizabeth, the Quad City Times, which is a major paper, as you know, in Iowa. And we've got more legislative endorsements and former legislators than anyone in this race in Iowa. And that's because I have such a strong grassroots operation. I know I don't have the highest name ID compared to all of these other people I'm running against, or the billions of dollars that 2 of my opponents have, but we've got is grit, which started in the day that I announced in the middle of that blizzard with 4 inches of snow on my head. And a lot of people have gotten out in this race, but I'm still standing, and it's because of what I bring with me. The debates have been good for me. There will be another debate in New Hampshire. I'll be on that stage, and I'm only one of 2 candidates left from the middle of the country, the very, very part of the country that we need to win.
But you are in 5th place right now in Iowa, and you're going to be stuck in the Senate most of this week. So what's the comeback strategy? How can you do it?
The comeback strategy is coming back here whenever I can. The minute we got done with the hearing yesterday, I got out to Iowa, did 3 events. I have 3 events today. It's like you turn into a pumpkin Cinderella. Then I go back there, and I've done teletown halls. We had 12,000 people on a teletown hall in the state of Iowa just last week. We'll be doing more of those. And then I have my surrogates out there. All of these endorsers, people from Minnesota, the Olympic curling coach, the gold medal curling coach. No one has that guy, Coach Phil. He came out for me, and we just keep trying to come up with new creative approaches. No one has ever run in a major race like this that's this close when you have to be back in the Senate the whole time. But I figured the voters of Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina are going to understand that I have a constitutional duty to fulfill. And the fact that I have this real job, and that I'm in the arena, and that I'm actually taking on the Trump administration and all of their shenanigans and behavior, I think that's actually a good thing. As when I sit in that chamber and I look over at my colleagues, I just keep thinking what I say in the campaign trail. This is a decency check. This is a patriotism check for our nation. And that proceeding is part of the overall problem with this president, and we know that. You just heard Senator Langford back up the president's team's contention that he did absolutely nothing wrong, suggesting that foreign interference in elections happens all the time. Which gets to the question, it still appears that the president's heading towards an acquittal in the Senate. Should the Senate move to censure, or at least try and censure President Trump if he is indeed acquitted? We are not at that point, George. Right now, what I want my colleagues to do is to join us in getting the witnesses. I literally don't know how you can sit over there and listen. Even when you hear the president's lawyers, they raise fact questions. They say, well, the facts aren't there. I want to hear from the men, to quote the Founding Fathers musical, to hear from the men in the room where it happens. That is people like Mr. Bolton and Mick Mulvaney. All of these signs point to things and discussions that they had with the President of the United States. And all we are asking for right now is 4 witnesses. 0 witnesses plus 0 evidence equals 0 justice. You can't have a trial without the witnesses. However they vote, whatever they choose to do when the evidence comes in, they cannot go down in history as the people that block the truth from coming forward, because eventually it will come forward.
Senator Klobuchar, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, George. It was great to be on.